What are some of the most fast and effective ways for me to lose fat? I love food and would like to know if you have any quick meal prep strategies that might make a difference.
Fast and effective ways to lose fat.
So stop with that. My first advice would
Mhm.
be stop with that. Like,
Yeah.
why is fast in that sentence? If you just left that out, then I think it's a much better question.
The healthier
What
question.
is the most effective way for me to lose fat, and put the timing piece aside. Now, if timing is an absolute factor for some, I don't know, you're a weight class athlete or something, then this gets very, very specific to the athlete. And
That's very
it
individualized.
is going to be very individual. But for the general person that's asking, like, what's the most fast and effective way? Leave out the fast. Let's just talk about effective and what we know. What we know is there's a few basic principles, right? Calories in versus calories out is very, very important. So if you're looking to lose body weight, specifically fat, then we're going to need to be in a deficit. But where we are going into that deficit, right, in terms of, where our maintenance calories may or may not be at this point, what our activity level is like, the types of foods and things that we're doing throughout the day, our stress levels, hormone profiles, all that will absolutely dictate whether you going into a deficit, further into a deficit than you might already be, or not into enough of a deficit, depending on if you're on the other end of that scale, will dictate whether or not you're going to be super effective at this.
Yeah.
Because I'm usually pushing people that want to lose weight. I'm usually adding calories to their shit to get them back up.
Going into the deficit, you're stressing your body even more. And if you're already stressed in other ways, then, going into a deficit, if you're already not eating enough, that's just going to add on the layers of stress.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I don't want to tiptoe around the question. People are like, what's the most effective way? Well, first off, we have to understand you. You need to understand you. There's some basic principles, calories in versus calories out. What does that mean? You need to understand your current health status,
your
exercise
metabolism?
program. What's your body doing right now? How many calories have you been eating consistently up until now? And what are the macro profiles, micronutrient profiles? What's the density of that look like from the food's perspective, right? There's a lot of other things. Sleep and stress management, your exercise program, all of that needs to be taken into consideration here in order to make this work. Now, again, not tiptoeing around the question. From the meal prep perspective, let's say I have all that, right? And I've got all that done. Like, what can I do to make sure that I'm staying on point with, again, those macros, that caloric need, and if I had to, if you could just wrap them up into a couple of basic principles, what would they be? First, you got to plan, right? We covered that under another question. You have to plan. You got to know what you need. You got to know when you're going to need it, and it needs to be there when you're ready. And then you have to execute that plan, right? Which means you got to eat that food. All right. So how do you do it super effectively? I think this question people already know the answer to, and I don't necessarily like this answer, but I'm going to say it anyway. Who do we know to be like the most proficient, effective, most knowledgeable around fat loss in terms of like in the industry? It's the bodybuilders, right? It's the fitness competitors.
Trail.
It's the bikini athletes. It's, competitors and whatever. Those are people. And what do? They meal prep. They cannot do this without meal prep. And what does it look like? It looks very much the same every single day, minus they may be cycling some calories, up or down. They may be going into a little bit of a deficit, more of a deficit one day, but they know what's going on.
These guys bring their meals out to dinner with other people, dude. They're like at dinner eating their meals.
You might not like this answer, but these guys got it dialed in, right? They know. So, and what do? Well, they're either using a meal prep company, or some of what they do is a meal prep program, or they're meal prepping their own food, which means they have to make a trip to the grocery store once, twice, 3 times a week, depending on, how this thing is going for them. So they plan for that, and they go and they put it all, they make it all ahead of time so they don't have to think about it. Right. And it's usually pretty simple. It's always centered around protein, right? They're always going to have their protein source. It's going to be there, whatever that is, beef, fish, chicken, eggs, whatever. Right. And they make that, and that's where the meal starts. And then it's, I need to get my green vegetables, my fruits, whatever, my fruits and vegetables in there somewhere, my micronutrients, my phytonutrients, all that stuff. So what is that? Usually that's not such a big deal. Like, you can almost like eyeball that. Like, I never known anybody that's eaten too much spinach in their life and made them fat, or green beans, or
Not happening.
It's not happening. Right. That's not gonna make you fat. So, eating too much protein with more, with more calories and, maybe a higher fatter protein, maybe that's starting to push you over into the surplus side of things. And the last thing obviously is the carbohydrate. What are you doing in that respect? And those bodybuilders, you guys have heard it. I don't need to tell you. It's potatoes and rice and oats.
Cream of wheat.
Yeah, cream of wheat, cream of rice, things like that. It's some type of starch. So if you're trying to be really effective and do this fast, again, cutting out the fast, worry about being fast at getting to the store, getting your food, getting it prepped so that you don't have to worry about it, so that you can be ready to execute the plan. That's really the easiest way to do it. And it for some people, and I don't want to say it's easiest, that's the easiest way to start doing it and to have a result, because outside of you not eating the food, it's really hard to fuck up at that point. Right? You just do what's in front of you. Set the alarm in the calendar for every, few hours or whenever your breaks are, however you're going to consume the food throughout the day. That whole 2.5 hour thing doesn't matter. Like, don't worry about that. Timing is not that important for you right now. Again, if you're a weight class athlete and you're trying to cut for a certain period, these are the details we might get into. But for most people, you're trying to do black belt shit. You're still a white belt, right? So yeah, get that stuff ready to go. Again, this might be a boring answer, but I think it's plan, prep, and then make sure you're following the execution of that. There really isn't any tips or tricks here that I can give you to say like, well, this will boost this.
Well,
anybody that tells you any different, I think is fucking lying to you. Yeah. I've tried it all. I've tried a lot of things, supplements, juices, diarrhea teas. Like I've done it all, like to cut weight for this or to do that or look good for that or whatever else. I'm going to tell you what, like the easiest way to do it, get yourself on understand what it is you're supposed to be doing, develop a plan behind it, be consistent. And if that's meal prepping on your own, getting a meal prep service. Sometimes I go out to eat and I already know what I get when I get there. Or before I'm going to get there, those people at that restaurant that I visit frequently, they make it the way I want it. Like Jeff's laughing because shout out to Bill's here in Willow Glen, California, San Jose. Yeah, like we walk in there and the food's already on the way.
I already know what I want. Yeah, there's no menu.
Yeah, so go to those kind of places, where they will do what you need or want, that kind of thing.
My cravings have been hard to control lately. What are some ways I can manage my cravings? Or if you have any healthy and delicious snack ideas, please share.
Cravings.
That could be driven hormonally.
Yes, it can.
Yeah.
Susie, would you like to talk about
that? Expand?
When you're talking about hormonally, as far as, that time of the month and what kinds of foods you're craving, whether it's, more fat and salt or maybe it's sweet. But yeah, it's a real thing. I was just talking with Kayla about this earlier, and I think her sister had said something about, oh my gosh, I'm craving certain foods around that time of the month. Well, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Even stress, you're stressed, your cortisol level raises, and a lot of people binge eat. And what are they eating? They're secretly, they don't know this, but they're eating to now blunt that cortisol response, right? And then they get basically addicted to that response of dealing with it. When really that's what we were just talking about in the last question, using carbohydrates to manage that, but they're not using the proper carbohydrates, right? It's usually a lot of sugar-laden, stuff like that, where they're just reaching for it for the, the response that it gives them. It's hyper-palatable. And dealing with the cortisol, right? It relaxes them.
Yeah, you just mentioned the hyperpalatability thing, which is one of the places I was going to go with this and trying to understand how people are eating and what it is that they're craving. Because I think what it is you're craving will tell you a lot about what's going on, right? Like, is it, I'm craving alcohol, right? And I'm not saying necessarily from an alcoholic's perspective, like what is considered alcoholism. We won't go there, but is that what you're reaching for? Is it the sweets? Is it the salty, crunchy type of stuff? What is it? Like, is it, people reach for candy, gummy bears, things like that. Like, I gotta tell you, like, if I'm reaching for candy, which I haven't eaten in a long time, it's either like really good chocolate, which for me is like, it's like medicine. I don't consider chocolate candy, or gummy shit, like gummy bears and whatever. And so, again, I think what you're craving will tell you a lot, and then also when you're craving it. So the first thing I would say is like, I have a lot of questions before I can answer this one very directly, but first would be is like, do you know how many calories you're eating right now? Are we eating enough? Like what's driving the craving? Is it just I'm hungry, or I'm hungry for this specifically? And these are very natural things that the body does. Like, you mentioned some of the reasons why there, Jeff. So, yeah, your cravings are generally going to be related to your habits, right? And what you've given your body as a routine. And when you start to adjust that, and I don't mean like from a food perspective, I just mean like maybe from a stress perspective, from an exercise perspective, from a from a routines perspective, like your body's an amazing adaptive machine. It will just get used to that. And if you try to change it, or either on purpose or not, whether if it senses a change, it's going to downregulate or upregulate other things. So this could be where your cravings are coming from. Let's make sure you're eating enough, right? That could be one thing. And then let's make sure you're balancing the things that you are eating to offset some of the things you may not be getting enough of. Some of the things that can impact these things could be vitamin and mineral deficiencies. So from a micronutrient standpoint, you know, these things are hard to like actually quantify, but like, let's just say if you're low in vitamin C and your body is craving, eating foods high in vitamin C, like example, oranges, that kind of makes good conventional sense, right? Like, oh, my body's telling me like I need this stuff, like I need these fruits or I need these vegetables in order to replace this. By the way, there's plenty of vitamin C in beef. So I'm just saying for those people like, dude, you could eat beef because I'm carnivore and that's where I get my vitamins. Yeah, you're right, you can, but most people don't crave that. They could, for their vitamin C. You don't usually hear it talked about that way. I digress. My point of that is you could have micronutrient, mineral deficiencies, which could be driving some of these things. So that might be something worth looking at. But again, before you start running tests, what are you currently doing?
Basics, yeah.
Because some of the stuff might pop off the paper and just go, should I eat 0 vegetables? I eat no vegetables, right? And so there's a lot of things that could come along with that in terms of just being underbalanced from a micronutrient perspective. I think the awareness of the craving is really important. Like, okay, it's really easy for me to say like, oh, Jeff, you're craving gummy bears. Just stop eating the gummy bears. Like, if it was that easy, then everybody would be having tremendous diet nutrition success. But I think, if you're going through your day and you're recognizing yourself in constantly having these things, then that is a routine. And you need to examine that. We need to step back from it and kind of figure some things out. There are hormones that impact cravings or your body's response to food. When we start to look at things like ghrelin and leptin, ghrelin is that thing, that you'll feel makes you kind of feel hungry, like you give your stomach growling, if you will. And leptin's the one that tells you if you're full. And, we talked about the insulin glucagon response. Like your body can become leptin resistant. Like you got enough of it, your body is just not feeling that anymore. And so as you get into like your meal, you're not feeling full, but you recognize there is something that you do eat that makes you feel that way, even if you've eaten too much. And oftentimes it's a sweet, right? Or it could be alcohol, right? It could be one of those things like, well, if I have this drink, then it shuts down that craving to do this other thing. Those are deeper level things. But again, if you're not sensitive to the hormones or the way your body should be responding to, your activities of eating and or daily activities, eating, those kind of things, that is something that, is worth looking into. And how do you impact your leptin response? You impact it through exercise and diet, and nutrition, and lifestyle. There's a huge interplay between cortisol, right, and leptin. There's a huge interplay between getting more exercise and the anabolic response that happens there as it balances out cortisol and all those things. So I don't want to get too far deep into that, but a lot of times that doesn't, if you're not being told you're full, then you might find something to, in effect, like self-medicate that to turn that response on if it's not working the way it should be working. And, again, examining like, well, what exactly is going on here? When are you feeling this craving and how's it being satisfied?
And it's usually the hyperpalatable foods that are overriding the ghrelin leptin response.
Can be.
right? So you're able just to eat more of this food because it's engineered that way.
Mhm.
They've spent millions and billions of dollars to do this. So all of these foods that
Good point.
you're reaching for are designed to override these bodies. Like if you sat down and you had beef and green beans and plain rice, would you be able to overeat it? Probably most people couldn't finish their plate for what they actually needed to eat, right? So you start looking at what types of foods that I'm eating, and this can dictate these systems in the body.
They do impact them in a few different ways. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. Just again, going back to the hyperpalatability of a lot of processed food and what our bodies are used to. And if we're not turning on all those reward centers, I mentioned the chocolate cake or whatever earlier, then there is a bit of an addiction. Let's just say like a dependency to it in order to get that feeling of I'm full or I'm satisfied. Two different things.
Like a heroin addict.
Yeah, kind of. Kind of
getting their fix.
Yeah, kind of.
Mhm.
So, I mean, there are a lot of studies with regard to norepinephrine, epinephrine, and those types of drugs,
Yeah.
and the commonalities between how food will impact the brain versus how the narcotic will impact the brain. So,
I think rats choose cocaine over whatever else they
Is that
sugar.
right?
Yeah, they choose the cocaine every time.
yeah,
Yeah,
that kind of makes sense to me.
I think so too.
I don't have any experience with cocaine, but God, I know a lot of people that do, and they just seem like they're having a great time.
having a blast.
I just began my health journey, but it's tough staying motivated. What strategies do you use to keep yourself or your clients motivated and stay on track?
The motivation
I was going to
question.
say, it goes back to, I think, the why.
And the
right?
little wins too,
Yeah.
I feel like this one's lumped in with all the others as well. Motivation for me comes from understanding what exercise does for me and what proper nutrition does for me and my body and going down the line, right? Because we're all aging, we're all getting older, right? I want to be healthier later, so I do these things now. I've seen a bunch of people that try to, at the end of their life, grab all of this stuff back, and it doesn't work that well, right? You've done years of stress on the body or eating a certain way, whatever it is. It's not going to change in 1 year. Right. So just setting myself up, that's my motivation. Right. And when I stop working out, I feel like shit and I don't want to feel that way. So it's motivation with clients. It's little wins. They'll be I want to lose this 100 pounds like we were talking about earlier. Well, you've lost 20. That's great. You don't hurt when you walk. You're hitting your protein goal. There's all these things that we can celebrate. And that helps bring them back to the main goal, right? Your education drives compliance. We're trying to teach them. If that doesn't happen and that's not there, they're going to lose motivation, even if you're there training with them, right? So you have to have them see these little things to keep the motivation up.
Yeah, the motivation being, it's kind of getting like being a cliched term now, but motivation is fleeting. Discipline is going to be the thing that gets you through when the motivation wanes, and if all you're doing is trying to bang your head against the locker to find that motivation, right? Like, oh, just get pumped up, more pre-workout, or, I need more music, more metal, whatever it is to get motivation. I'm gonna tell you it works until it doesn't. It's gonna go away.
Nope.
It's not a good long-term plan. So if you're rooting your approach to your plan, health, fitness, longevity and motivation alone, it's a recipe for disaster. Jeff, you hit the nail on the head. It's really thinking about the long term. We did a podcast on fitness over 40 and mastering fitness over 40, I think is what we titled it. And it was really we were just talking about like how we viewed fitness and health and longevity, say in our 20s versus how we viewed it in our 30s versus how we're viewing it at, I'm viewing it in my 40s and I'm looking down the line now into the 50s and the 60s, the 70s, and God damn it, I'm making it into my 80s and beyond, right? Like that's the plan.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not expecting that. I'm planning on being there. What I am expecting is that I'm going to do the work now so that when I get there, I can enjoy this. I mean, you just talk about people trying to grab it back. I mean, so many people, again, the term is, trading your health for wealth. And that is tragic, when I see people doing that. And the other thing that I find tragic is people want to pay for it. Like they want to pay to try to get that back. That doesn't work either. You can't do that. And so when I look at the term motivation, thinking about those things motivates the hell out of me. The other thing that motivates the hell out of me is just looking at what's important. And I think if you take a step back and you look at what's really important for you, the workout is just it's a component of the important things. taking care of your health so that you and taking care of yourself. And again, people like this is like my therapy. If it's taking care of your head and your brain and whatever, that shit's important. But it isn't all. It isn't everything. It is a small piece of the. Well, it's an important piece, small or large as it may be for you or at the time, your particular situation. There's a lot of other things to take into consideration there, and family, can be that thing. But I think it has to come internally. Like this is not something that can be manufactured. You really need to sit and examine what your why is. And I think that's the challenge most people have is they've borrowed somebody else's why, or their why, and as a result, it's either that or they haven't developed it really well at all, and it ends up being very shallow. Just call it undeveloped. Like, yeah, I want to be healthier. Okay, it's a good start, but why? Well, because I want to live, I want to be around to see my kids. And some people could go, that's a great thing. That'll keep you motivated. Guess what? I've been doing this shit 25 years, and guess what? It doesn't keep people motivated. Why do you want to be around for your kids? Think about that. The next thing starts coming. Like, well, my dad or my mom wasn't around for me. Really? And how did that make you feel? Start digging down to the next level. Well, I felt alone. I felt afraid. I don't want my kids to feel like that. Now we start taking it to the next level. That's developing the why. That is really digging down. And I wish people would do that more frequently before they latched on to what they feel like is going to be the answer for their problem, their question, their issue. And that's largely a lot of what coaching is for us is, at this point, like when I was 23, 24 years old when I started this, I didn't understand any of that shit. That took some time for me to develop, and in developing my own whys about things. Like, my why about becoming a trainer wasn't very strong at the time. It became very strong over time, and quite frankly, a short period of time. But understanding how that impacted, that those questions impact other people, or and then ultimately impacted me, and what they did do, what they didn't do, what they committed to and didn't commit to was a big lesson for me. So yeah, I think that in terms of staying motivated, you understand those reasons why, and you should remind yourself of those on occasion. And along the way, like if you're making progress towards those things, taking time out, to recognize that, give gratitude to yourself, to the people, to the things that have helped you get to where you are, and honor those in whatever way that makes sense for you. Maybe it's just thinking about it. Maybe it's saying thank you to somebody or whatever else. We've said on the show before, like, do we sit around and celebrate all the little victories that we have? I'm just not that kind of a person. I don't need that to stay motivated. Some people do. Yep. So if you're one of those people that needs to like regularly check in and tick that box, physically, like I did it, or exit out on the calendar, or you set the app up, to give you the thumbs up when you hit your milestone,
you closed
or whatever
your circle.
Else. Yep. Yeah, you closed your circle today.
Your
all
watch
those things.
Vibrated.
Then create those things for yourself, right? Create those things for yourself. But if that's the thing, if you don't get that, is that going to mean the difference between you quitting or continuing? Then I would say we have some more work to do.
Yeah, David Goggins says motivation's great until you get up at 5 a.m. and open the door and the cold air fucking hits you and you miss that warm bed.
I mean, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, Mike Tyson, all that kind of thing. So your plan's not going to be is not going to be the motivating factor. There has to be something underneath there. So yeah, staying motivated is a challenge every human faces. And you will, reaching to learn how somebody else did it, I think is a good thing, because you can learn how people find their motivations. But ultimately, their motivation is different than yours. And you reading their book, or watching their documentary, or listening to their podcast, or whatever else, that isn't you, and that's not gonna define your why. You're not going to define your why that way. You have to sit back and really examine that. So yeah, if you find yourself falling off the motivation train, welcome to the fucking club. And that's going to continue to happen. So what are you reaching to from a vision perspective? Like, what do I really want here? How is it going to make me feel when I finally reach that point? How does my decision that I'm making right now not to work out, not to eat too much, whatever, how does that impact those things? More specifically, if is what I'm doing supporting my goal of being there for my kids so they don't feel alone and afraid, Try asking yourself that question and see if that chocolate cake or, that beer or, skipping that workout is as easy to do as it might have been if it was just my goal is to lose some weight because I really want to look good for Cancun.
Mhm.
So far this summer, I've been to quite a few social events with a lot of tempting food choices. Are there any practical tips I can use to make healthy decisions in such situations?
The summer
Mm.
barbecue food dilemma.
It's my favorite topic.
Yeah, why?
Because just eat.
That's what
Just
I
fucking
said.
social event, dude.
Yeah.
Have a good time.
Yeah.
You go into 50 of these things a month and maybe chill out a little bit. But dude, you're going to go have a good time. I'm not putting restrictions on myself. I want to see my friends. I want to have a good time. We can count the calories if we want to and fast the next day or partition calories throughout the week so we're at the same weekly average. I mean, it's not that big of a deal.
I think it's a great start, man. People freak out. They have this anxiety around it. Again, I think part of it is like we've talked about commitment. We've talked about having a plan. And, we've said this in other podcasts. It's like, I'm on the rails right now. I don't want to get off the rails. Like rails are not forgiving. You get off 1 inch, it's catastrophic
Some people
failure.
are like that.
Yeah, but some people are like that, right? They can't afford to go there. So I think part of it is like knowing who you are and what you're about and what your why is and how this impacts you. Going back to the last question, right? Like, hey, I'm gonna go to the barbecue today, the pool barbecue or the beach or whatever, and I'm gonna eat my ass off. Whatever's there, I'm gonna eat. I'm not gonna think too much about it. I'll come back to this in a second in terms of what the realities end up being. I'm gonna have some drinks, right? I'm probably gonna get dehydrated and whatever, and I'm gonna have fun doing it. Some people, I'm the same way. Like it's like, hey, whatever. It's fine. Cece's a little different than me. She operates a little bit differently than me on that way. She's like, no, I ain't doing that dip. I ain't doing the chips and dip. I'm
gonna stand across the room. God damn it, Karen! You put those chips and dip out again.
My mom's the worst. She's the devil. Like around the weekend holidays, like there's the meat and cheese trays. There's all this stuff.
Love it.
Oh yeah, that's like so for me. Like socially, going back to this person's question, like the family gatherings were always all about food, man. It's always about the food and the drinks and whatever else. And so when I go to these things, I really look forward to it, and it's part of the experience. So I don't think too hard about it. However, like more other social events, you mentioned it. Like, what's the frequency of these things? Like, is this every weekend? Because if there's every weekend, we have some tips and tricks here. I think, or tips to give people in terms of how to maybe manage themselves a little differently. But to your point, Jeff, I think the first thing is like if you've had a plan and you're on the plan, getting off the plan sometimes is a really good idea. Very good idea. And especially if we're talking about like one day, one meal. For a lot of like somebody asked about the transformations. For anybody that's ever gone through any kind of a transformation here at Red Dot Fitness, there has always been diet breaks. There's always been social events. There's always been holidays.
It's life.
There's always been a happy hour in there. I mean, I had a client one time. It was, look, dude, I'm going out on Friday nights, every Friday night with the boys, every Friday. And I'm probably going to drink my ass off. But the rest of the 6 3/4 days during the week, I will do whatever the fuck I have to in order to be fit, to be as healthy as I can. But I know I'm going to get plastered on Friday night. Okay, let's plan for that. We call that a non-negotiable, right? Like, all right, dude, as long as we know. Like, I'm not saying it's awesome, but I'm also not going to tell you you're an asshole or you're a bad person for doing it. At least we have that out there in front of us. Like, okay, we'll work around it. Just understand how this impacts. I understand fully, dude. Doesn't change a thing. I'm still doing it. Okay. All right. We're on the same page at least. My point of this, like going to the events is if you're on plan all the time or frequently, or you're doing a really good job of maintaining this consistency, getting to one of these events and to your point, Jeff, just, I don't care, whatever. If it looks good, I'm going to eat it. That can be healthy, right? In a mental, psychological, or emotional kind of way. It can also be part of the plan. Like, hey, I need a refeed day, or I'm in a calorie deficit for the 2 days before, and this day I'm going to eat up or refeed or eat. I call it eating up. Let's just fucking eat up. Like generally, I would like you to be making good food choices in that case. Let's keep the protein, where it needs to be. Let's try to keep the sugars down, whatever. But at the same time, like it can help you in your approach to managing and cycling calories and your metabolism and things like that without getting too far into the weeds. But for those people that are like, look, dude, I don't want to do that, or this is very regular for me. I'm out quite often socially. It's very easy for me to get off track. What can you do?
Eat before you go.
That's a great idea.
get full off your meal. And then if you're there and you get hungry, it's probably going to pick at something. And if you do, try to have it be protein. I don't know if someone's grilling or whatever's there, but you try to keep...
Because you'll tend to not overeat the protein.
Yeah, and just trying to stick with, most people are under eating protein and the satiating factor of it as well.
Yeah, it's a great one. Simple one, like get your meals in before you go. Don't go in hungry.
Yeah.
Don't go to these things or try to avoid going hungry.
Because you'll torture yourself trying to not eat. That
sucks.
That sucks.
Well, also there's, and I get it. Like there's like a stigma attached with those. What's up, dude? You're not eating? Like you on a diet? Like that's a bad thing.
You can't be in an Italian's house and do that.
Like you're being, like you're being shamed. Like, dude, you're one of the, don't anybody try. Hey, everybody, Jeff's on a diet. Yep. Like, just get this guy some water. He's not having that's.
Fuck that guy, by the way.
Yeah, that's reasonable. That's a reasonable expectation.
Yeah, no, it happens all the time.
So I get it. So eating, being prepared for that is another thing. Having the right mindset of
mindset.
And I think some of that is like communicating with other people. Like, like if this is really hard for you and and you're going out to hang out with your friends or whatever, maybe if you can communicate it to them, it's like, dude, I'm struggling. Like, I'm coming, but I'm not drinking, which if that's your thing, or, hey, but I'm probably not eating, so don't plan on having me eat. I've got this other thing that I'm doing, right? They can give you all the hard time through the text message thread or whatever beforehand, and then when you get there, you do your thing.
That or take your own food.
Right. So that is a way, or if it's family or whatever, you do that. But that was the other thing I was going to say. Like if there's a way for you to contribute to the food, it's like, hey, what should we bring?
Yeah, that's a good
one. So if somebody says bring a dessert, like that's the one that always gets me because I love those desserts. But if somebody says, hey, if you bring a salad or, you bring a vegetable or you bring, like we've got this protein, if you want something different, bring it. I always take that option. Like, well, very rarely do I not take that option because if I just like the way I cook the protein, I have very specific, standards, or things that I want with the protein. So if I get the option like, we're grilling, and they said, bring your own protein. Shit, I know exactly what I'm bringing, right? And then I can control it a little bit. So that's one way to do it. So that's another thing is pre-communicate. Can you contribute in some way? How do you influence this? That might sound weird, but it's not weird around my friends because when we get together, it's an expensive meal. Everybody's eating their ass off, right? So people are usually totally open to having somebody bring something along. If it's like a potluck or whatever, I would contribute.
As far as which aspect of the question, I mean, if we're at a social gathering and how do you control yourself? For me, it's like, remember I'm going to frame it around alcohol. Remember the last time you had a drink? How did you feel the next day? Because I personally have cut back on my alcohol intake, my wine, and yes, I enjoy it. And yes, I love my old fashions and stuff like that. And a lot of times you're generous enough to let me have a sip or two and that quells it for me versus me having to have my own drink. But if I have too many drinks, then I don't like the way it feels the next day. And so I just remind myself, do you really want to feel like that? Or, you know what? You're supposed to go work out. Do you really want to feel like that the next day? And for me, that's generally enough.
Yeah,
nope, I don't.
That internal conversation that happens rather than just being caught up in the moment. I think, a lot of these things, people are going out or whatever. I would not be afraid to just, obviously you're perusing the menu, you see something there you like, but it's, you got questions about it. I know the anxiety that people feel about asking questions of the server, hey, how does this cook?
It's their job.
Whatever else. Because it goes back to the shaming piece and the friends, you feeling like the odd man out. Trust me, they feel a lot differently about it than you think they do. And if they're doing that, it's generally there's one person, they're doing it because there's some level of insecureness going on there, or, maybe they're returning fire because you've done the same to them in a different way. So it could be that as well. But yeah, I would, ahead of time, if you know where you're going and you've never been there before, hit the internet. Like everybody's got their menus on the thing now, so you can think ahead of time. Like, what do I need to do?
That's a good one.
If this is going to be a place where it's higher fat type or carbohydrate type. You mentioned Italian food, right? Like I love Italian food. And if I'm going to Italian,
we're gonna do Italian.
I'm doing Italian food, man. So and by the way, there's usually a lot of fish, a lot of meat, and then there's always going to be, maybe some bread, some pasta, some starchy stuff there, right? Sauces and things like that. So I know what I'm getting myself into. I will manage my day around that. You know, like I know this is happening, so like I'm staying lower carb or lower fat through the rest of the day or whatever. So when I get there, I can enjoy with maybe minimal to no modification, you know, that thing. And then going back to what you were saying, Jeff, which is like, fuck it, just do it. You know, just have a great time. It's one meal. One meal, just like one workout, is not going to make or break any result that you're getting. But if you know you're that person where one meal sets you on a path to, you know, disaster. Again, we talked about the rails. I don't want people to feel like they're on rails. I want people to feel like they, the analogy I think I've used is like on a 3-lane freeway where you got a fast lane, a middle lane, and a slow lane, and that you understand how to navigate through those lanes, you know, when it makes the most sense for you. So if you're really been doing great in that fast lane and everything's on point, and you know, one day you just want to kick it all the way over to the have at it. Have at it and feel good about it. Just know how it fits in. I think the bigger part of this is like, if you can plan these things, like, and if you have a long-term plan, not just how am I getting through tomorrow or even today, or where's my next meal coming from, and not having an answer for that. If you have a long-term plan, it's very easy to make adjustments or just not even worry about it. When we're coaching people, these are the questions that I think come up often because people think they have to be perfect all the time. That's nonsense. Depending on your goal, right, and what you're specifically chasing, trying to achieve, or where you're coming into the situation from a health perspective or whatever, maybe this is not a good idea. Maybe, like, if you know you can't control yourself and this is a health risk, then you shouldn't go.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe that's the answer. Maybe it's not the answer you want to hear, but maybe you shouldn't go. It's that cut and dry. But otherwise, I think there's a lot of other things you can do when we can plan for it.
Yeah.
So think about, like, what is my plan? If I can, and how do I fit it into my plan more specifically? Because every plan should have flexibility. Again, if you got to step on stage in 2 months, right? You got to be shredded in your bikini or in your board shorts or whatever else. You better have some discipline. I mean, that's the answer. So I think it's different for different folks.
It's like planning a fucking trip. You don't just get on the airplane and go to this place without, you have an idea of like, oh, we're going to go to Cabo, we're staying here, right? You plan ahead, just like anything in life, right? Nothing different.